Today we are going to unpack tariffs, what they are, why they exist, and why the way they're being used right now is causing real turbulence, especially for industries you might, expect on this channel, Swiss watches and the watch industry overall. Now please, I'll keep this calm, fact-based and visual, so by the end you'll see exactly why brands are warning of global price hikes. No politics, please, that's not why we have this channel, just facts and a little bit of storytelling. Now before we continue, this is not professional advice, I'm simply a curious watch enthusiast and I like to understand just how expensive my hobby might become given all the news going around currently on the incoming price hikes for watches around the world. Now, at their core, tariffs are taxes on goods that cross borders. Okay, country A buys something from country B, and before it enters the market, the government adds a tariff, say 10%. Now that makes imports more expensive, giving domestic producers a fighting chance. It's a tool that countries around the world have used for centuries. It can protect jobs, shield new industries or struggling industries, and, as we have seen, act as leverage in negotiations. Now, tariffs at their core are, as I said, one of the oldest tools of economic policy if you think about it. So governments use them to protect domestic industries from foreign competition, to nurture certain strategic sectors, or to raise revenue. Now, in a classical sense, tariffs, if I can say that way, tariffs buy time. So they give local companies breathing room to potentially invest, scale up, and eventually compete globally without being undercut by cheaper imports, or also, protecting essential industries which you want to keep having domestic production. You protect those by, again, introducing tariffs. Now, the difference today is not that tariffs exist. They always have, but that the US has been introducing super high tariffs on certain goods, or I should say almost all goods at random, and often with very little notice. So that unpredictability defeats the original purpose, alright? Instead of giving industries time to adapt or negotiate, companies are effectively being blindsided here, and that makes planning, pricing, and supply chain decisions incredibly difficult. Now, I can tell you one thing, supply chains do not like this, like being blindsided, okay? You can't take a global supply chain, cut out a link and expect the chain not to break down. It will partly break down. Now let's go look at some data real quick. So the US is the single biggest export market for, in this case here, Swiss watches. Now tariffs on these imports have not only are not only set to increase dramatically, but they've also been very much unpredictable, okay? If you go back just a few weeks now, the Swiss were very happy that they were not in the EU because they were going to get the greatest deal ever. Now fast forward a few weeks and now suddenly the Switzerland, has a worse deal than the EU. So there you go. Now, impact on watch brands, right? What happens when tariffs spike like this? Brands, essentially, in my view, will have three options. Absorb the cost is number one, but that cuts directly into margins. Totally feasible on the short term, but absolutely not sustainable if you ask me. Second option, pass it fully to US consumers. Also possible on the short term, but definitely not a wise economic decision, because that of course risks killing demand in a key export market, especially at the entry and mid-luxury level. So I don't see that happening either. Third option, share the pain globally. And this is what some brands are already communicating, right? Breitling, for example, has clearly hinted, they spelled it out letter by letter, that they may hold the line for a month or two if tariffs stay elevated. They will, however, raise prices, and they will do that worldwide. That way the US market doesn't bear the entire burden. Instead, it's spread then across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and the entire watch buying universe. So the next time you see a price increase on a watch in Paris or Singapore, it may actually be a ripple effect. Not that it may, it will be a ripple effect from a tariff decision in the US. Now, knowing the watch industry a little bit, believe me, it will be very hard to bring those prices back down in case tariffs suddenly drop. Price increases in this industry tend to stick. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before now, but economists often say businesses can live with high taxes, but not with uncertainty. Now, if tariffs were set at, say, 15% consistently, brands could plan pricing, hedge currencies, adjust distribution, basically, and move forward. But if tariffs can swing to 35% or even higher with just a month's notice, that does not, in fact, result in companies in jumping up and scrambling to make things work. No, in fact, what it does, it creates absolute paralysis. Companies will not act. They will go into a wait-and-see mode. Very simple. Companies cannot stock properly, they can't set seasonal pricing, and they can't give retailers clarity. Which basically means that no matter what, in my view, the only realistic outcome here is number 3. In fact, I'd argue, even if tariffs are now cancelled again, I believe we are already fully on course for number 3 here. Share pain globally. Everybody's gonna be hurting. Because even if at this point they drop to 0, who says that will last? So the industry, any industry, will anticipate and already hike prices because of the turbulence that is ahead. So what does this mean going forward? Short term, well, who really knows, I certainly don't. Brands will either absorb some costs temporarily or test small price hikes. Retailers likely will be offering fewer discounts, I would think, and stock availability may shrink in the US for the time being. However, long term, the most likely outcome, and no matter how I look at this story, really, the most likely outcome from my amateur point of view here is a more expensive global market for luxury watches, regardless of whether you live in New York, Paris, or Tokyo. The watch on your wrist tomorrow may well be more expensive, not because of design or scarcity, but because of a line in a tariff schedule somewhere on the other end of the planet.